I made a promise to them, and they have fulfilled it. You don't need to worry. His wife, however, still felt a shadow of doubt. I trust you, T, but please be careful. Sometimes, great wealth can bring great trouble. T nodded, understanding her concern. I promise I will always look out for our family. We have worked hard, and now it is our time to enjoy the blessings. As days turned into weeks, T's wealth continued to grow. He invested in land, bought more livestock, and even started his own farm. The villagers' curiosity only grew, but T kept the secret of his wealth close to his heart, sharing it with no one. Despite the luxurious life they now led, T's wife kept a close watch on her husband. She noticed how he seemed more distant and preoccupied at times, as if a burden weighed heavily on his shoulders. She knew T loved their family dearly, but she couldn't help but wonder if the price of their newfound wealth was higher than they realized. For now, the family enjoyed their prosperity, and the village buzzed with stories of T's transformation. Little did they know, the true test of T's choices and the price of his wealth was still to come. As T's wealth grew, his old friends, who had once abandoned him due to his poverty, began to return. They were eager to be close to him again, drawn by his newfound riches. Every day, they would visit T's house, showering him with praise and asking how he had become so wealthy so quickly. One afternoon, as T sat in his grand living room, a group of his old friends came to see him. They brought gifts and spoke with exaggerated enthusiasm about how happy they were to see him doing well. T, old friend, one of them said, we are so proud of you. You have achieved so much in such a short time. Please tell us your secret. How did you become so rich? T smiled politely but felt uneasy. He knew that revealing the true source of his wealth would bring trouble. I have been blessed by the gods, he replied. They saw my hard work and decided to reward me. His friends exchanged glances, not entirely convinced. One of them leaned closer and said, come now, T, we are your friends. You can trust us. There must be more to it than just divine blessings. T maintained his calm demeanor. It is the truth. The gods have been kind to me. I cannot explain it any other way. His friends were persistent. They visited him regularly, each time trying different ways to coax the secret out of him. They would flatter him, bring him lavish gifts, and even offer to share their own wealth in exchange for his knowledge. T, think of how much more we could achieve together, another friend suggested. If you share your secret, we can all be wealthy and powerful. But T remained firm. He knew that the secret of his wealth was not something he could share lightly. It was tied to a dark ritual, and he didn't want to drag anyone else into the dangerous pact he had made. I appreciate your offers, my friends, but I must decline. I cannot share what is not mine to give, T said. As time went on, his friends' persistence began to wane. They grew frustrated with T's reluctance and started to distance themselves once more. Some even whispered behind his back, spreading rumors and speculation about the true nature of his wealth. T felt the strain of their suspicion and the weight of the secret he carried. Despite the luxurious life he now led, he often found himself longing for the simple, honest days before the riches came. He missed the genuine companionship he once had, even if it was tainted by poverty. At home, T's wife noticed his troubled demeanor. One evening, as they sat together, she gently asked, T, what is bothering you? I see the worry in your eyes. T sighed deeply and said, our friends, they keep asking about our wealth. They do not believe it is just the God's blessings. I cannot tell them the truth, but their questions never stop. His wife squeezed his hand and said, we must stay strong, T. We have each other, and that is what matters most. Let them talk. As long as we know the truth, we can face anything. T nodded, grateful for her support. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to protect his family and the secret of their wealth. The return of his friends had reminded him that true loyalty and love could not be bought, and he cherished the genuine bond he had with his family above all else. With his wife's reassurance, T resolved to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their strength as a family would guide them through even the darkest times. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a messenger arrived at T's house with a message. The old man from the forest had summoned T. The message was brief and ominous, causing a shiver to run down T's spine. He knew that the old man's summons could only mean one thing, a demand. The next morning, T made his way to the edge of the forest where the old man lived, his heart pounding with each step, dread gnawing at his insides. When he reached the old man's hut, he found the old man waiting for him, his expression grave. T, the old man said, his voice as ancient as the trees around them, the time has come for you to fulfill your part of the bargain. The gods demand a sacrifice. T's heart sank. What kind of sacrifice? He asked, his voice trembling. The old man looked at T with piercing eyes. You must sacrifice your only daughter, Amina, to the gods. It is the price for the wealth you have received. T staggered back, his mind reeling with horror. No, not Amina. She is my only daughter. I cannot do this. Amina hesitated but took the drink. Okay, father, she said, trusting his words. She drank the potion and took the oil. As the potion took effect and Amina fell unconscious, T's heart broke. He carried her to the forest, each step feeling like a weight on his soul. T reached the clearing where the ritual was to take place. He laid Amina gently on the ground, her face peaceful and unaware of the horror about to unfold. He took a deep breath, his hand shaking as he prepared to complete the ritual. I'm so sorry, Amina, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. He knelt beside her, the weight of his decision crushing him. Just as he was about to proceed, a piercing scream shattered the silence. T, no. It was his wife, her voice filled with desperation. She had followed him, suspecting something was terribly wrong. The villagers, awakened by her scream, rushed to the forest, their torches lighting up the darkness. They found T kneeling over Amina and quickly restrained him. His wife ran to Amina, tears streaming down her face as she cradled their daughter. What have you done, T? She cried, her voice trembling with shock and grief. The villagers took Amina to the herbalist, hoping to undo whatever had been done to her. T was left behind, his heart shattered by the enormity of his actions and the realization of what he had almost done. That night, T was tied up and kept in his compound. The villagers gathered him, their faces filled with a mixture of anger and pity. T's wife wept throughout the night, unable to comprehend how her loving husband could be driven to such a terrible deed. As the first light of dawn broke, the villagers gathered outside T's home, murmuring in disbelief and anger. Amina had been taken to the herbalist, who was working tirelessly to reverse the effects of the ritual. T's wife sat beside their daughter, her tears falling silently, her heart breaking for what her husband had almost done. The villagers' anger grew as they learned more about T's actions. They couldn't understand how a man they had known all their lives could be driven to such a horrific deed. Their trust in him was shattered, replaced by a mix of outrage and sorrow. T must face justice, one of the elders declared. We must take him to the king. Bound and surrounded by the villagers, T was led to the king's palace, his head hung low, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily on his shoulders. The villagers whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with a mix of anger and pity for the man they once respected. In the grand hall of the palace, the king sat on his throne, his face stern and filled with disappointment. The villagers presented T before him, explaining the terrible events of the night. T, is this true? The king asked, his voice echoing in the hall. T, weakened by the ritual's backlash, fell to his knees and confessed. Yes, my king, it is true. I was manipulated by Chief Azuka. He promised me wealth if I performed a ritual, but I didn't know it would come to this. The king's eyes narrowed. Chief Azuka, explain yourself. T, with a trembling voice, recounted the events leading up to the night of the sacrifice. He spoke of the old man in the forest, the ritual, and the immense pressure and fear that drove him to such desperation. The wealth came at a terrible price, T said, his voice breaking. Chief Azuka vanished after I accepted his offer. He knew what he was doing. He used me. The king listened, his expression growing darker with each word. He turned to his guards. Find Chief Azuka. He must answer for his actions. But when the guards searched for Chief Azuka, they found that he had already fled the village, leaving behind only the chaos and destruction he had orchestrated. T, you have committed a grave sin, the king said, but since you luckily did not take the life of your own daughter thanks to your wife, I see the manipulation and fear that drove you. Your punishment will be severe, but your life will be spared. You will spend the rest of your days in prison, where your wife and children can come and see you often, but you will work to atone for your actions. T bowed his head, accepting his fate. Thank you, my king, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The villagers dispersed, their hearts heavy with the weight of what had transpired. T's wife returned to the herbalist's hut, where Amina was slowly recovering. She knew their family would never be the same, but she held on to hope that they could find a way to heal. As T was led away to his prison cell, he felt a deep sense of regret. He had lost everything he had ever worked for, all for the promise of easy riches. The love and happiness of his family, once his greatest treasure, had been shattered by his own choices. In his cell, T vowed to spend the rest of his life atoning for his sins, hoping that one day his family might find it in their hearts to forgive him. As T lay in his cell, the sounds of the village echoing faintly in the distance, he found a measure of solace. He had paid a high price for his wrong choices, but he hoped that his story would serve as a lesson to others. The love of family and the integrity of one's character were treasures far greater than any amount of gold. T's tale spread throughout the village, a reminder of the dangers of greed and the true meaning of wealth. Though he spent his remaining days in captivity, T's heart found some peace in knowing that his family had forgiven him and moved on to live good, honest lives.